in the newspaper. He was captain of the football team. He played basketball, and he even played baseball, and he played baseball actually the most. He played that throughout his adulthood. Hello, welcome to another week of Mix It Up Black History and the Restoration, where we mix up a recipe and mix up the restoration by learning about early Black members of the church. I'm Taylor Ricks, and this week is a cautionary tale. I am the music chorister lady in primary, and I'm like, how fun, let's learn about the pioneers this week, because it's Pioneer Day. And then I was like, oh, I could make bread like the pioneers, and they could make butter. I don't know. It snowballed, and here we are making 50 loaves of tiny little bread in these tiny little things. And honestly, okay, first of all, it's ridiculous. This is my personality. I do things way harder than they need to be. It just is like not me if it's not hard. But like, this is so unnecessary. It's not like the primary kids are gonna be like, oh, Sister Ricks loves us because she made bread. They don't care. But it also isn't taking that long because I get 10 loaves out of a batch, and so we're just cycling through. So you're just joining me in the middle. We've got some that's done, some that's rising, some that's ready to be put in tins. I don't even know what's going on. Some in the oven, and we're gonna mix up our last batch while we learn about, yeah, that was a long build-in, while we learn about Hyrum Leggroan. Okay, so listen, Hiram was the great-grandson of Esther Jane Elizabeth Manning James. You'll remember her. She was, she's in the movie, not her personally, okay. The movie Jane and Emma is about her. She's that Jane. And I think it's week 5 that I talk about her on here. So if you want to go learn more about Jane. So this is her great-grandson. So he's the son of Esther Jane James. That's the granddaughter of Jane. And he is the son of Henry Alexander LeGrone. So we've talked about all of those people, so you can go check those stories out. So because of that, he was born in the Salt Lake Valley, in Mill Creek. And so he worked on his parents' farm in Mill Creek his whole life with his siblings. They were integral parts in the farm and worked as farm hands there. So here we go. We're gonna add the oil, the flour to our dry ingredients, and I'm gonna let it whisk for just a second. Here we go. And I'm gonna clean up real quick while it does that. Okay. So when he was about 19 years old, his grandma Jane passed away. So that's pretty good. He got to spend great-grandma. So that's a long time with his great-grandma. And she was a great example to him. He remained a member of the church throughout his entire life. But in high school, and I'm like, it's also the Olympics, so this is a good story. He was an incredible athlete. He went to Granite High School in Salt Lake City-ish area. Granite. And he was like in the newspaper. He was captain of the football team. He played basketball, and he even played baseball, and he played baseball actually the most. He played that throughout his adulthood. But he was often spoken about in the newspapers because of his talent. He was just so good. And people said he was the most popular kid in school because his talent was so great. But his talent in high school did not stop with football alone. He actually also loved and excelled at science. And because of his commitment to his education, and because he was the second generation of enslaved, or the first of non-enslaved people in his family, he was the first to receive his high school diploma in his family, which is awesome. Now we let this knead, the machine kneads it for about 10 minutes. Super easy. I'm gonna clean up and switch out some things while it does that. Okay, did you see how easy that dough is? Like seriously, so easy. All right. Okay, so he was super good and well educated. So when he, in 1912, he married Nancy Caroline Bankhead, and she was the daughter to a man who came as a slave to the Salt Lake Valley to George Bankhead, and we've talked about the Bankheads before. The difference though is Nancy Caroline, she went by Carrie, so we'll call her Carrie. She actually was not a member of the church. She was Seventh-day Adventist and was throughout her entire life. And Hiram was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints throughout his life, but they were able to make it work, which I love. And they had three daughters and one son. I almost said that backwards because I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. So they had the opposite. They had 3 daughters and 1 son. Their daughter, Stina, I believe it is, died as an infant. But the rest of their children were blessed into the church and baptized into the church. Some of them were baptized in the basement of the tabernacle, which is fun. So she did support him in like having his children participate in like church-related activities. The way he took care of his family was not the family business of running a farm. He actually worked on various railroads throughout his adulthood. Often it was his job to help like put the engines where they needed to go and make sure that things were running smoothly that way. Not as much building the railroad tracks as it was like the operation of the trains once the tracks were built. And in one scenario, he saw a woman, and I don't like, the story was vague, and so I'm like, I want more details, but he saw a woman fall 45 feet, and like she fell and got her hand pinned under one of the wagon train thingies, cart wheels. My words are broken today, you guys. That's what this much bread will do to you. She got her hand pinned, and he saw the whole thing happen. And he like ran and got the conductor to stop, and essentially he saved her life. He got her unpinned. I don't think there's any chance of saving her hand, but he was able to help save her life. And he said it was a very like scary and traumatic thing to see, as as you would imagine, right? So he was just such a good, loved person. In fact, he registered for the war, World War I, and then he registered again for World War II, and he was not selected in the draft for either one, but he was willing to go and signed up for those drafts. He just wasn't chosen either time. Then in 1945, he decided to run for county commissioner, and he had a really good, valiant race. He was able to secure 867 votes, which is incredible. He did not win, but he was running against people that were trying to maintain their seat. So he was like the only newcomer, as you could say. So that's pretty good that he was able to secure some votes and that he stood up for that. So he always was like a contributing and positive member of his community, and people always had like the kindest things to say about him and said he was such a leader and someone that so many people liked to be around. In August of 1854, he was 65 years old and he died of lung cancer, unfortunately. And I don't know if that has anything to do with his work on the railroads, but I would imagine all that soot and yuckiness that happens on the railroad at that time probably played a part in it, I would imagine. His wife, Carrie, she lived until she was 100 years old, which I thought was so impressive for the time. Absolutely incredible. She never remarried though, which meant that she was single for over 30 years as a widow, and hopefully like her sons and daughter and everything helped take care of her. And they both, she even said, like at his funeral was in an LDS chapel and everything, she said he remained a faithful member his entire life. So they both stayed faithful to their own religions their entire life, and they are buried next to each other in the Eliason burial gardens that we've talked about many times past. that has many Black pioneers that farmed and lived in the Mill Creek area. That's where they are buried. And so is Hiram and his wife, Carrie. So that is the story of Hyrum Leggroan, and I just loved it. I love how much he put himself out there. He's such a good example to me, and I wish I could be as good at sports as he was. But I just love that story of his education and all of those things. So thank you so much for coming to this week. So this is when it rises. It doesn't rise in the bowl. Now I just let it rise in the pans. For this tiny, I cook them for like 20 minutes, and it's been perfect. But this recipe normally makes 2 regular size, like yummy and deliciously large roll, what is this? Bread loaves. And it's just so good and so easy because it only has to rise the one time, which is so nice. And so then you just can serve it with whatever sounds delicious to you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much again for coming to Mix It Up Black History and the Restoration. I'm Taylor Ricks, and I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.